Good evening, everyone. I hope everyone is okay. Let me see if can you hear me? Okay, good. So today is the second Monday of the month, and as every second Monday of each month, we have our meeting in English. And it's usually the same way as in Portuguese. We have a prayer, then we have a message, a brief message, then someone comes and talks a little bit about the gospel, and then we have the final prayer, some announcements, and then we finish our meeting. Tonight I'm going to do the prayer. Nancy will come here and read a brief message for us, then I'll come back to say a few words about the gospel of the night. We're going to talk a little bit about chapter number 16. We are still studying chapter 16, and we'll go in a little detail when I'm back here. So with this, let's do our prayer. Let's welcome everyone that's online. I don't know if there's anyone online, but maybe in the future they will come back and hear us. Maybe I'm going to listen to myself in the future. So let's do our prayer. We can close our eyes if we want to, so that we can raise our thoughts and open our hearts and our minds and our feelings to receive even more of the blessings that we are always receiving from God, from our dear Master Jesus, from the good spirits that from the higher realms send us always good thoughts, good feelings, and that their prayers also together with ours can reach our dear friend Jesus, so that he can bless us all, bless our lives, bless our families, our friends. But we would like to ask him to bless our country, bless our planet, so that we all, by thinking of love, by thinking of fraternity, of brotherhood, of friendship, we can learn more and more to live better with everybody that surrounds us, living in a state of fraternity and of love and friendship. So Jesus, please help us. Help us understand that love is the only way forward. And with this, bless us and bless our meeting for tonight. So be it. So let's invite Nancy, and she's going to read a message from Our Daily Bread.
Good evening, everyone. The message is number 177, and the title is Let Us Guard Our Mental Health. Set your mind on things above, not on earthly things. Who said that was Paul, Colossians 3:2. Primitive Christianity was not unaware of the necessity of a sound, healthy mind enlightened by superior aspirations in the lives of those who embrace the renovating essence of the gospel. The work of present, notable thinkers finds its roots much earlier. Today, those who deal with mediumistic phenomena, how that the death of the flesh does not impose celestial pleasures. The individual finds himself beyond the tomb, with the virtues and defects, ideas and vices, to which he dedicated himself while in the physical body. The criminal becomes drawn to the circle of his own crimes when they are not chained to the accomplices of the original fault committed. The miser is tied to the superfluous wealth that he abusively hoarded. The proud remains tied to the fleeting titles. The alcoholic makes the rounds looking for the possibility of satisfying the thirst that controls his centers of force. He who has been passionate over capricious organizations of the self wastes long days to disassociate himself from the veil of illusion in which his personality is segregated. The program precedes the service. The project charts the realization. Thought is a radiating energy. If we spread it on earth, we will naturally be attached to the ground. Let us elevate it toward the heights, and we will win the sublime spirituality. Our spirit will reside wherever we project our thoughts, leaving bases of goodness and evil. For this very reason, Paul stated wisely, set your mind on things above. Thank you, everyone.
Let us guard our mental health. So let's put good things in our minds. And that's why we are here, I guess. We are here to put something good in our minds because that's what we need. So that the more good stuff we have in our minds, the more good stuff we do for the world. Message 177 from Our Daily Bread. So tonight we're going to talk about this topic, Jesus at Zacchaeus' house. And it's on the Gospel according to Spiritism. This is one of the translations to English. Chapter 16, item number 4. And what I have here is basically the text. There's nothing else other than text. So because I find it to be very illuminating, I decided to copy the text, and we're going to go through the text. And while we are reading together, we'll make some comments, and we will go, thinking about this theme. And one of the questions that I raised myself when I was reading and thinking about this was, this story happened 2,000 years ago, about 2,000 years ago, more or less, right? So as if we go to the calendars, we're going to see that, Jesus was born, some people say around the year 4. So, and he lived for about 33, 34. Some people say 37. Traditionally, we say that Jesus lived up to he was 33, but there's no so he lived about 30, let's say 40 years. So it would be the year 37, more or less, or 33, 34. We're in 2025, so we are getting to 2,000 years when these things happened. What I find very interesting is how can a story that happened 2,000 years ago, or stories that happened even farther away, like in the times of Moses, or even before that, in other cultures, in other circumstances, how do they affect us even today? Why do we keep reading them? Why do we keep studying them? Why do we keep reflecting upon them? And is it still valid? Is it still does it still apply to us? And the more I read, the more I try to understand, and the more I try to go deep inside some of these stories, I clearly see that there's a teaching, there's something there that really affects us, that really touches us in one point or in another. Maybe it will not touch everybody, maybe it will not serve for every single one of us, but there's certainly something in many of these stories that are kind of like the universal story, a universal teaching that we can use in basically any culture, any time, in a lot of different circumstances. Some stuff are things from the past that we don't use anymore, or we may want to learn just because it was something from the past, and I'm curious and I want to know how this thing was, or what was happening, or why this happened. But some of these teachings from the Gospels and from other books too, they are still very, very current if we know what we are looking for, if we understand what it is that we're saying. So, for example, if I come and say, if I come and tell a kid that was born like, I don't know, 10 years ago, and he's like running around and learning stuff, and I say, go pick up a phone and call someone, what will he do? He will look for a cell phone, right? Almost nobody else, almost nobody have a telephone in the house anymore. If you're already working, you probably have a phone in your office because that's still needed. But if you're a 10-year-old, you basically don't know what a phone is. What you know is what a cell phone is. And what I find funny is that if we give a phone to a 10-year-old, he will not know how to dial a phone, right? He will not know how to dial a phone because, and there are videos on the internet that I find funny about this, because they get a phone and then they look at the phone and it's just, of course, the handle and the numbers are right here. So they are looking at the phone and how do I dial, right? So for us to understand certain things, we have to know what those things are at that time where that thing was being used. If we don't know what they were, we basically have no idea what they are. So sometimes we hear words, sometimes we hear things, and maybe we know what they are. Maybe we know the word because somebody said, but do we know how culturally important that thing is for that person or for that time? Do we really know what that means? And I'm going to use an example of a Brazilian literature book that I read a few years ago. And in this short story, they mention a town. Can't remember the name of the town right now, but it's in the state of Minas Gerais. So, and then they mention this town, and there's this train that's going to pass by. There's this woman, and there's this girl. And you read it, and it's interesting. But to me, it's just a name of a town. And then people talked at the time, they were talking about so much about this story, and I said, why are they so into this story? What does it mean? So I went and read someone that made a study about that short story, and one of the first things that the person said was, one thing that you need to know about this story is that the name of the town that they mention is one of the keys to understanding the story. I didn't know it. I didn't know the town. I had heard the name. I knew it was a town. I knew it was a city. I knew it was, but I didn't know why the author chose that town name and just left the town name and didn't mention anything else. It ends up that the town that he cites was the town where there was this hospital for crazy or for lunatics at the time. And those girls, the mother and the daughter, they were going into that train because they were considered to be, although we didn't see it very clearly in the story, but they were considered to be lunatics by the townsfolk. And then they sent that girl, those two, to that town to go to the hospital. But I didn't know because I didn't know the town. I didn't know that the town had that story with that specific hospital. So the town to me was just a town. But to the author and to everybody else that knew what the town was, it made a lot of sense. So that's what culturally, how culture is so important for us to understand certain things when we are reading, when we are studying, when we are trying to understand better certain things. Even certain types of professions, of things that we use, like a phone. Oh, he grabbed the phone and he dialed. That may have a little, that may give us a little hint of what, of how he used the phone. And maybe that's important for the story, because to dial is to do this. But we say dial, but dial is to turn around something, turn something around. When we use a phone to dial, we don't do this anymore, but we still call it dial. And why? Because the first phones we had to dial, or we dialed the radio, right? You don't dial the radio like that anymore. It's just a button to press, but you go to that dial. So words and locations, towns, names, professions, they're all very important for us to understand and to localize ourselves, to physically kind of be present where that story is being told, so that we can be there and see or feel. So when we are reading, especially stuff that was written a long time ago, we may understand it without having to go into a lot of details, into deep details. But once, the more we know about it, and the more we try to get those hints and those little details, we can kind of see more of what they were trying to tell us. So, having said that and having given that introduction, like I said in the beginning, the thing that I did here, just put the text from Luke 19:1-10, because that's the only thing that Kardec put on this item number 4 from the Gospel according to Spiritism, Jesus at Zacchaeus' house. So maybe the text is a little bit different than what I have here. So I'm going to check, and couldn't find this translation. So I have the book here, but I'm going to read from there with you guys. So this is Luke chapter 19, verses 1-10. Jesus entered Jericho and was passing through. A man was there by the name of Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector and was wealthy. He wanted to see who Jesus was, but because he was short, he could not see over the crowd. So he ran ahead and climbed a sycamore fig tree to see him, since Jesus was coming that way. When Jesus reached the spot, he looked up and said to him, "Zacchaeus, come down immediately. I must stay at your house today." So he came down at once and welcomed him gladly. All the people saw this and began to mutter, He has gone to be the guest of a sinner. But Zacchaeus stood up and said to the Lord, "Look, Lord, here and now I give half of my possessions to the poor. And if I have cheated anybody out of anything, I will pay back 4 times the amount." Jesus said to him, "Today salvation has come to this house, because this man too is a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to seek and to save the lost." I mean, if we read this before, if we read the story before, if we know the story, we kind of understand what it is being said. This guy wanted to see Jesus, couldn't see Jesus because he was too short, was a tiny man, right? And he had to go up the tree, climbed up the tree, and saw Jesus passing by. Jesus stops and looks at him and says, "Hey, come down. I need to go to your house." Goes to his house. One thing that's important, he was a tax collector. He was a rich man. That's why Kardec puts it here in this chapter. You cannot save both God and mammon. And God is God. Mammon is the representation of wealth, of fortune, of being very rich, or being serving richness, let's say, or wealth. And then he goes into his house. A lot of people start looking at Jesus and say, "Hey, who is this guy? Now he wants to preach, and then he goes to the house of this guy, which is wealthy." And I thought that Jesus was praying to the poor. So he goes up and enters the house, and Zacchaeus says, I'm gonna, pay back everything. If anybody thinks that I did something wrong, I'll give it back." And Jesus says, "Yeah, salvation has come to his house, because I came to the ones who need, not for." So it's, to me, it's very simple. It is very simple. There's maybe in the surface, there's not much to it. But, and that's where I think that when we know a little bit more about some of the things that are said, make a little, makes us see a little deeper into this story. So I'm going to go back, and I'm going to I'm not going to read nonstop again, but I'm going to stop at a few different places. I always say, when we start here at the study, to study something, and we're studying the book Paul and Stephen on Tuesdays. So a few years ago when we started, I said, when we are reading something, when we are about to read something, to me, it is very important to browse the book first, to know what the book is about, to have a feel for the book. You don't need to read it, like just read it. But what I like to do is I like to check the beginning, look at it. If there's an index or contents, I go and check what it is. Go to the back, see if there's something interesting. That's my thing. So I like to peruse the book, to go ahead and maybe opening a page and read a little bit, just to have a feeling of what's going to happen, and that's it. And then I go and read from the start. But I try to read everything, because if it was written, to me, it needs to be read. It's not there just to be there, right? So just a brief parenthesis here. There was once I was looking at audiobooks. It was a while ago, and I saw this the Spirit's book audiobook. So I checked it, and it was read by a famous Brazilian actor. So I said, "Oh, that must be interesting." So I get the audiobook just to see what it is. And then right at the beginning, he says, or the producers, whoever says, they say, we are just going to read the questions and answers of the book. And I said, what? How can you read the Spirit's book without reading the introduction? You're missing, I guess, the main point of the whole book, of how and why are we reading and what are we going to find. And there's so much in the introduction, in the preface, in the, I said, oh, I pass. That's me. That's me. With this book, it's the same thing. The Gospel According to Spiritism. I mean, when we get this book, and if we don't read the introduction and the objective of this work, the authority, and then there's a third part in the introduction that's called historical facts that Kardec puts here. In this part, in this historical facts, Kardec says, basically, was my introduction to this topic. He says, for us to understand, to better understand stories and the time of Jesus, we have to know a minimum of stuff so that we can understand stuff and why stuff is happening. So we have to know a few names. We have to know who the Pharisees were. We have to know what towns were. And what he says here is that this is just the bare minimum. I'm going to put a few of these names, but there's much more that we need to know so that we can go deeper and really try to understand a little bit more. So, for example, he starts by saying, Jesus entered Jericho and was passing through. One sentence. And I'm not going to do this because that's not the main focus, and I'm not a studious person on the topic. I mean, to know deep. But if it were like a deep study, a person that studies the Gospels and the Bible very deeply, I bet that he could probably do a seminar just in the first sentence there. Because the first thing that comes to mind when I read Jesus entered Jericho and was passing through, there's a parable that he recounts. He says, and then comes a man down from Jerusalem to Jericho. And he was attacked by thieves. And he was left naked and almost dead. Then comes a priest, comes a Levite, and then comes a Samaritan. Right? First of all, he's coming down from Jericho from Jerusalem to Jericho. Right? Jesus is not coming down from anywhere. He's just passing. He's just horizontally passing. He's not coming down to Jericho. He's not lowering himself down to Jericho. He's passing by. Paul says in one of his letters that we can go down to where the swines are, where there's dirt and stuff. But we can go there, grab what we need, and leave. But some people stay, and then they mess themselves all up. And Paul says that's where the bad things are. You can go down and don't stay. Do whatever you need and leave. Jesus is just passing. He's not staying in Jericho. He's not grabbed by Jericho. He's not coming from a high standards and then lowering his standards. He's just passing through Jericho. And Jericho was a town that is one of the things that we when we read the word Jericho, to us is nothing. It means nothing. But for example, if we think about Boston, there's an image that comes to our mind because we live here and we know what Boston represents. When we think about New York, we have an image of New York. But what if I say Reno? What comes to your mind? If I say Ashburnham, to us it means nothing. What does Jericho mean to us? Nothing. But Jericho was a center of wealth. There was a lot of rich people around. It and that's one of the reasons why it is so important in this sense of what Kardec is putting here, for us to understand that Jericho, it represents this wealth, this being rich. There's a book, a Brazilian book, called Boa Nova. I don't, maybe it was translated already. I've never really gotten into it in English. It could be translated as the Good News. I'm not sure if it was translated or not. But there's a story in it where Humberto de Campos, which is the spirit writer through Chico Xavier, and he goes deeper into this story of Zacchaeus, and where what he recounts on that story is that before this was happening, the disciples of Jesus, the apostles, they were discussing about, okay, so what about rich people? How do we treat them? No, rich people, where they are all going to hell. They are not going to be saved. And Jesus is just there, like quiet, just listening and trying to see what he's going to say. And then ends up that this is his teaching to all the disciples. And it's a very interesting story there, but I'm not going to go there. Sorry, not going to go there. But Jericho is this center of wealth of the time. It is as if it's New York. More. It is as if Jericho is Wall Street. So there's this huge wealth that runs around there. It's a center. So, and in this town there was a man called Zacchaeus, and he was what? A tax collector. But you could be a tax collector and not be wealthy, but he's not only a tax collector, and he's also wealthy. Another name for a health collector was publicans. The publicans were usually the tax collectors. Tax collectors were very badly seen at the time, but very badly seen. Because when we think about tax collecting these days, that's what we think. We work the whole year. Comes April 15, time limit for you to say whatever you have, pay back whatever you have to pay in taxes. Then you pay. Or if you have been paying, it's easy. If you paid over more than what you needed to pay, you're going to receive something back. If not, then you're going to pay more. But that's what it is. And everybody, like Benjamin Franklin says, only two things certain in life: death and taxes. And that's it. So there's two certain things in life: death and taxes. Oh, it's good to pay taxes. Oh, nobody likes to pay taxes, but we like fancy roads. We like, water. We like, service. We have to pay. The Romans, when they took over a place, they would say, okay, here's the emperor. He needs money to pay for his food, for his castles, for everything that he wants. Oh, okay, we're going to pave some roads for you. We're going to do some stuff. But my life is more important than yours. So I want money from you guys. I need to receive from your town this amount. Boom. Okay? Some people come and say, okay, I'm going to be the tax collector. I'm going to receive from you, and I'm going to pay the Romans. The Romans, they really don't care how much you get from you. From the town, they need, I don't know, 1 million, right? There's 1 million people. So you would get 1 per each to get to the Romans. I'm going to charge 4. So I pay 1, and I keep the other 3. What happens if you don't have the money? Slavery. You pay with your daughter's life, with your son's life. That's how you pay it. The beginning of Paul and Stephen, there's a big issue with Joshadeb, which is the father of one of the main characters, Jeziel, which will become Stephen later on. And to what we understand is something related to possessions and having to pay for something, and he feels like he's been robbed, but there's nothing that he can do. Absolutely nothing. He cannot do anything. There's no protection. There's no law other than whatever the Romans want. How would we see a tax collector? Not from these days, but from back then, because probably we would not be tax collectors. The amount of people that existed and the amount of people that were in these high numbers, we were in the low class if we lived around. It was most likely, because when we, in Spiritism, it's funny. Sometimes a person says, oh, who were you in your previous life? And, it probably was Mark Antony or Cleopatra. Said, no, you're probably the slave to the slave to the slave of Cleopatra, because the amount of people that were poor was overwhelmingly small or bigger than compared to people that were rich and had stuff. So a tax collector that was wealthy was not very common, or was common in a certain sense, but everybody that looked at Zacchaeus probably said, oh, this is a sinner. And that's what they call him in the second slide that we already read. Because, what are you doing with all this money? So once we start to know a little bit more about these terrible things that were, we start to look at these stories, I think, and that's how I am. I start to look at these stories as not anymore about like children's stories, as if it was, I'm just telling you this story just to pass your time. No, we're not telling the story to pass your time. I'm telling you the story for me and for us to go into that place, be in that mindset, and think about, because we look at this and we say, oh, Zacchaeus did a good thing here. Yeah, he did a good thing. And then we tend to judge the other ones who were calling him sinner. But if we were there, what would we call him? And Jesus asks us not to judge others, but that's the first thing that we do. We judge. Because when we are reading, it's like as if we're taking part, and then we take, oh no, I'm going to take this part of this story, and then, oh, I'm better than Zacchaeus, or I'm better than these guys that are judging Zacchaeus. But wouldn't we? When we see a rich person, when we see something happen on the television, what do we mentally say about that person? How do we think about that person that committed that specific crime, whatever the crime is, be it small or large? How do we think about it? So when I read these stories, I try to, but I try to be in every single part of the story. The only place that I tend to say, and I say this a few times, say this quite often, that I don't put myself in the position of, is to put myself in the position of Jesus, because I have no clue of how he really feels about it. Because we look at what Jesus is saying and say, can I really say that? Really? Can I really feel that the way he is saying? I don't know. So I don't try not to put myself into his position, because it is very hard. It is a model for me to go after, but it's not a position that I put myself into. So I put myself in Jericho. I put myself in Zacchaeus' place, but I also put myself in the crowd's place, Because probably I would not be wealthy as Zacchaeus, but I would be in the crowd watching him do whatever he was doing. So we stopped at in wealthy, right? When we talked about this. And so he was not only a tax collector, right? He was a chief tax collector. And he was wealthy. So he was the target. There was no better target than Zacchaeus. He wanted, and then we stopped there. Now we have a little bit of a background, right? He wanted to see who Jesus was. What is that? What does that word see intend? What is this see? I read this a few times throughout my life, and it took me some time to really think that this see that he is saying there is not this see here. It is in a way, and it kind of gives us a little bit of a hint, because he says he was short and he could not see over the crowd. So he uses the word see in two different places. He could not see him, but he wanted to see him. So in my mind, it was always the fact that he wanted to just physically see Jesus. So he ran ahead, and I'm going to come back to the sea later on. So he ran ahead and climbed a sycamore fig tree to see him, since Jesus was coming that way. To me, the see, right, this first see there, if you want to know someone, you will do whatever you can to know that person. He was a short man. How would he stand out? How would he be able to be seen or to see Jesus if not going up above what he is to get to what Jesus is? And that's where the figure of speech comes. Because the story is so well written, in such a small space, because in the Bible, in the New Testament, is like this. It's a few lines, and we're seeing here it's just a few lines, but it has so much packed into it in just a few lines. So he climbs this tree. So it is as if the storyteller, which is Luke in this case, it is as if he is saying, okay, who is this guy? People look at him and see him as a very tiny man. Maybe he himself sees himself as a tiny man. And when we say sees himself as a tiny man, I'm not saying only physically. I'm saying that he feels so down. He feels so put down by everybody else that he feels small. And he wants to be able to grow. He wants to go up somehow. And he doesn't know what to do. But he heard about this Jesus. Because why would you want to know Jesus? Why would you want to know Jesus if you had not heard about him? So he must have heard stories about this guy who is coming and talking about saving other people, talking about the kingdom of God that's coming, the kingdom of God that's among us. Probably heard about the Sermon on the Mount, some of the stories. So he must have heard something about this man that's coming through Jericho. And he wants to see who this guy is because everybody is talking about him. So he runs and he says, okay, the only place that I can go to reach Jesus, and that's a teaching for us. How can we get to Jesus if we don't try to raise ourselves? So the sycamore tree is a tree that is strong, is kind of has a big cover, and it can hold a few people on top of the tree if you climb it. Some of these sycamore trees, some of these fig trees, they are kind of dangerous in a certain way. Some of them have kind of some spikes, so you have to be very careful sometimes. And of course, not even more, they don't say how old he was, but if you are climbing a tree, if you really want it that bad, and if you're my age and my weight, maybe you want to really be careful climbing a tree. But he climbs a tree. The fact that he climbs a tree to see a man that's coming is that he really wants to do something about it. He's not just passing by. Oh, I heard about this guy. Let me just stand here and see what. No, that's not what he's about. He really wants to do it, and that's a calling for all of us to look at this and say, hey, he did it. I can do it. I can climb a tree too. So let's see where we go. So he is there now. Was he the only one? Probably not. If he was passing by, why is he on the tree? Because he couldn't see, because there was a crowd. They said it. There was a lot of people. He was short. So he raised himself up. He raised himself up to see Jesus. And what happens? Jesus see him back. He saw probably a lot of other people, but among them, he saw him. When Jesus reached the spot, he looked up and said to him, and he calls Zacchaeus by the name. He calls him by the name. And of course, he must, people probably talk about him. He was the chief tax collector. So it's not an unknown person, It's not to say that Jesus, knew him. He knew him, but it's not to say that Jesus never heard of him. He heard of him, and he probably knew who he was. There was no photographs around, but, maybe some descriptions and stuff. Come down immediately. Come. I must stay at your house today. I don't know you, but I'm not sure if I would open the door to Jesus like that. It's to me, it's a little bit scary. It's a little bit scary because, I don't know if you had this experience before, but I had it, and I'm gonna share. That was a long time ago. I still had black hair, only black hair. I don't know, maybe I was 15, 16. I was in Natal, where I was born, and we were having this conference, like a symposium, a seminar, whatever it was, and Raul Teixeira was there. And I don't know if everybody know who Raul Teixeira is, but I used to listen to him, and was the first time that he was coming, and my father was with him and a few other people, and he called me. My father called me and said, come here. I came close to Raul Teixeira, I can remember this moment, my feeling and whatever I felt at that time. Um, I couldn't say a word. I couldn't speak. I couldn't do anything. I was completely frozen. I started crying like a baby. I started like bawling my eyes out. I was like completely, I was almost convulsing in a way. I just couldn't. It was that, I don't know. I mean, I cannot explain it. I'm not a medium, so I couldn't see it. I can't, but the feeling was as if like something took over me, like a magnetic force or whatever, and I couldn't look at him. I couldn't do anything, and I just remembered that he came and said some few words to me and embraced me. My father came, and then after a few minutes, I just laughed and I just couldn't do anything. So when I say that I don't know if Jesus would, it's just that thing, because the magnetic force, the presence, it's so powerful that I don't know. I mean, you feel like I felt at that moment. I felt as if I was a completely open book. If he could, as if he was looking at me and seeing the deepest parts of my soul at that specific moment. And I'm talking about Raul Teixeira, which is a man like us. But probably my admiration and my feeling towards him was so big and so powerful that I had that thing right there, and nobody ever did that to me again. But it was that at that moment when I realized, and when I tend to think about Jesus and about how some people are with telling stories and bringing themselves into us with their stories, like a Divaldo that comes and tells us a story, or a person that you hear Padre Fabio Di Mello telling a story. You just like feel that. And I only saw him like on a TV. We just recorded stuff, but it's that kind of power. So when Jesus comes to him and says, "Come down immediately," said, "Come to my level, come to where I am. I must go into your house and stay at your house today." So he came down and at once and welcomed him gladly. Are we ready to be invited by Jesus to go into our house? It's not us inviting him. He is inviting himself to go to our house. And are we ready? And what is our preparation for that? Because that happens, that will happen, that happens sometimes. And are we ready? Is our house ready? Right? It doesn't matter who comes to our house. What is the thing that we say? Don't pay attention, right? It doesn't matter. We just clean, we just organize, everything is perfect. Person comes to our house, say, don't pay attention, everything's a mess. That's the first thing we say. Is our house ready for Jesus to come? Hey, come down. I'm going to go into our house and stay there. All the people saw this and began to mutter, he has gone to be the guest of a sinner. That's us, the ones that were not invited. Looking at him, that's envy, that's pride, that's vanity, that's a lot of stuff. How are we? Are we ready? We say we don't know. And then another person gets invited, and then we say, why was he invited and not me? That's why I like to put myself in these places, because we do that. Maybe not all the time, but sometimes we do that. We think about this, and that's how should we judge. I highly recommend, I mean, maybe you read it already, but I highly recommend reading the passage from Boa Nova, from the Good News. I think it's chapter 23, where we see more of this story, the before happens, while it happens, and a little bit after, because we're going to see how the disciples were, what they were thinking, how Jesus does his stuff, and then what the disciples think at the end. And but let's keep going. We are 5 minutes to the end, and still have this to go. So he doesn't care about what people are saying, or maybe he cares, and that's why he does this. But based on Jesus's response, is not just from his mouth that this is coming, because for him to say this with a lot of people listening, and when we think about houses at this time, we think that, if we go into our house and we close our doors these days, basically nobody can hear anything outside our houses because everything is insulated, especially here. But at this time, and depending on where you are, even in Brazil and even here, if you say something in a house and a neighbor is close by, or there's people outside, everybody will hear what you're talking about. So he cannot be saying this just to say it. He will be in bad shape if he says this. And so here now I give half of my possessions to the poor, and if I have cheated anybody out of anything, I will pay back 4 times the amount. What is he saying? I'm going to do whatever I can to be a better person. If it's money-wise, it's money-wise. But it doesn't need to be money-wise. I can pay back in so many other ways. I may have cheated someone, not out of money, but out of something else. And I can pay back. I can give back. I can forgive, forget. I can be forgiven. I can ask for forgiveness. I can do something. I can this. I can this. I can this. So the story here is, of course, it's Zacchaeus. It talks about money. It talks about what he's going to give back. There's more than just, why is he saying that he's going to pay 4 times? Why is he saying that he's going to give half? There's meaning to these two. It's not just 4 times because he wants to take it out of his mind. It's more than what he needs to do it. He wants to do more than what he's required to do by law, because he really intends to give it back. So when you say, 4 times or whatever, it's not just, it has meaning to it too, which we don't have time to go to, and I'm not a specialist, so I'm not going to go into this. And then to finish, Jesus says to him, today salvation has come to this house. So I'm going to stop right there. Haroldo, in one of his talks, he says one thing that I find it to be very interesting. He says that this word, salvation, in Hebrew, or in Aramaic, or in the language that they were speaking at the time, is very close to the word Jesus. He says that the word salvation is it is as if Jesus wanted to make what we call in English a pun. He wanted to say, I entered this house with you today. Not that necessarily salvation entered this house. So he, and Haroldo says, we look at Jesus and we think that Jesus is this kind of, stern man, never laughs, never do anything. It's like, I tend to think of, can you imagine if Jesus was like doing sermons the entire day to everybody? He would be like insufferable. We would never follow a person like that. Never. He has to be a man of the people. He has to be a person that knows how to laugh, that knows how to tell a good joke, that knows how to play with people, that knows how to play with words, that knows how to, gather people around him. Otherwise, people were not going to follow him. There will be like a following here, following there. So Jesus, to me, is like a person that is relatable. that you can relate to him. Otherwise, we met a few people that you cannot relate to, that, they enter a place and then you see that they are going to, because it's just not a little bit like me, for example, right? It's, you just, maybe one or two people get close, but not everybody. Not Jesus, not as I can see. So he was able to, probably crack some jokes, probably tell a few stories. We only know what is written here, but Jesus was there, like smiling with people, telling stories, hugging people, or even if it was not, he was not a hugger or whatever, but he was there. He needed to be. So when Haroldo says that, I really, like to believe that what Jesus was saying is, salvation, but not because he was there, not because, oh, salvation came from the sky and now you're saved. No, it's not like that. I am here with you. I'm enjoying my time with you here. So salvation came, I came, but salvation came to you not because I am here. Salvation came to you because you decided to change. Because you saw what it is, you heard what I said, you felt what I'm trying to show you, you felt my love, you feel this. And then he finalizes by saying, because this man too is a son of Abraham. He is part of humanity. He is not outside of, because that's the big problem. It's usually us against them. And if we don't leave this behind, if we really don't see that it doesn't matter who they are, it doesn't matter who it is, we are all son of the man. We are all brothers and sisters, period. There's no excuse for anything. I was listening to this talk, and this a good friend of mine, she said something that I found to be very, very, very interesting. She said this: the biggest compliment that Jesus always that Jesus gave to anyone in the Gospels was to a Roman. Remember the story when the general came to Jesus and asked Jesus to cure his servant. And Jesus says, bring the servant here. And the man looks at Jesus and says, no. I asked you if you guys were, wanted to Jesus in your house. But Jesus comes to you and says, bring him here and I'll do what you need me to do. And the guy looks at Jesus's eye. You look at Jesus and says, no. This guy, a Roman general, he said no to Jesus. And he said more. He said, no, if I want my people to do something, I send them to do it and they do it. So you send your people, you say the word, and he will be cured. And what does Jesus say? He is cured. Nowhere in Israel there was a man with this faith. No son of Abraham had ever had this amount of faith. Your servant is cured, and the servant is cured. This is the biggest compliment that Jesus gave to someone that's completely outside of whatever we want to call closest circle. Because he was a Roman, he was a Gentile, he was not a Jew. And people like, oh, I only love people who are from my religion. I only love people who love my candidate. I only love people who is from my race, from my state, from my country. We are brothers. We are sisters. We are son of men, For the Son of Man came to seek and save the lost. Jesus does not separate people. He wants everybody to be together. Zacchaeus, come down immediately. I'm going to stay at your place. Everybody is saying bad things about Zacchaeus. Does Jesus care? No. Jesus doesn't care about this. He cares about what's inside our hearts. Nobody can see Zacchaeus' heart. Jesus can. He can see our hearts. How are our hearts? That's what we need to care about. So if we learn from Zacchaeus that we need to raise to get to Jesus's point, he will get to us. We need to put some effort, you know. Let's go to Planet Fitness of Spirituality, whatever we call it. So we can climb the tree. And that's how I kind of like to see at least a little bit of what Zacchaeus' story tells me. And I love this story. Thank you guys for your attention. Are we done? Okay. Yeah, it's I like this story. I really appreciate this story. There's so much to this, and it really touches me. So yeah, so we have now we're going to do our final prayer. I'm just going to give some of our announcements here. There's not a lot of announcements. We don't have anything like major happening, but so we have our meetings on Mondays, every Monday at the same time, sometimes in English, once every month, every second Monday of the month. Then on Tuesdays we are studying Paul and Stephen, as I mentioned here, and we are in chapter 5, second part. Awesome chapter. I mean, the book is awesome, but chapter 5 is sensational. Sorry. We have on Saturdays we have our meetings as well. They are only in I was going to say in Spanish. I have no idea why Spanish came to my mind. It's all in Portuguese. And would like to remind about the gospel at home, or God at home, where we gather together in our house and we read a little passage of a book or of the gospel according to Spiritism, discuss a little bit about it, so that we are inviting Jesus to our house. So maybe one day he will invite us to his house, or he invites himself to our house. And once a week, half an hour, a little bit, so we can have the good spirits around us a little bit more at that time, and we learn a little bit more about the gospel. And next month in English we will have probably Lucas. I think he will be here around. We keep following the study of the gospel according to Spiritism, item 5, I guess. And I think that's it. Is there anything else, Nancy? I think we're good, right? Yeah, so let's do our final prayer, and then we're going to have our passes, and we will be good to go.